Mr. President, I come to the floor to lend my voice to asking my colleagues to vote for the motion to proceed to the FDA Administration Safety and Innovation Act. Mr. President, I come to this floor as someone who represents a state that is absolutely critical to the innovation economy. And like you in Delaware, with its excellent private sector and public sector, have been in the hallmark of innovation. If you're from Maryland, you know that life science innovation is one of the important economic engines in our economy, both today and in the future. We're the home to flagship government agencies like the National Institutes of Health and to FDA. Iconic internationally branded universities that do research and move it into clinical practice at Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland. And also lots of thriving biotech companies and some medical devices. So for us, life science is part of the lifeblood of the Maryland economy, and it's also part of the lifeblood of the American economy. My gosh, think of what we do. We come up with new biological products, new pharmaceuticals, new medical devices that save lives, improve lives, and also enable them to help people in our own country. And because they are FDA approved, the gold standard for safety and efficacy, they can sell these products around the world, often to countries that will never, ever be able to afford an FDA. Now, where we are is we've worked very closely on a bipartisan basis to be able to create the legislative framework called PDUFA, the Pharmaceutical Drug User Fee Act. And there will be a lot of other UFAs, UFAA, user fees in this. And we have worked together on a bipartisan basis to bring this legislation to the floor. I note on the floor at this moment is the ranking member of the full Health, Education, Labor Committee, the gentleman from Wyoming, Senator Enzi, who has been a leader in fashioning legislation where we can continue the mission of what we want at FDA, safety and efficacy, moving drugs into clinical practice, regulations that are sensible, regulate but don't strangulate the innovation economy or the potential for saving or improving lives. The bill before us is integral to achieving this shared goal. This is not new legislation. PDUFA was enacted in 1992. At that time, we were facing almost a crisis in their country. There was an unduly long wait for patients to have access to new medicines and technologies. For FDA, it often took 2 or 3 years to review a drug application. The submission of materials were submitted manually in a very klutzy fashion. It cost manufacturers almost the tune of $10 million a month. So we decided to come together in the era where Bill Clinton said big government was over, not to make government bigger, but for government to be smaller. And we came up with a public-private partnership called PDUFA, the Pharmaceutical User Fee legislation. It supports drug review, and in exchange, FDA's agreement. So those who made the products paid a fee to be able to have their drugs reviewed, and also they expected their government to reduce the time that it took in order to move it expeditiously and yet safely. Now, let's be clear. This is a public-private partnership. For FDA, as it looks at remember, FDA has 2 jobs, food safety and then the safety of drugs and medical devices. More than 60% in the drug and medical devices comes from industry fees, $712 million. The remainder comes from federal appropriations, $473 million. So private sector really carries a big part of this responsibility. The kind of staffing, expertise, and modernization we have at FDA could not have happened without this public-private partnership. It's been a success. Now the more than 1,500 new medicines or technologies have been approved since 1992. And everything from the dreaded C words like cancer and cardiovascular disease to infectious disease to the dreaded A words around Alzheimer's, which we're working on, and others. It's allowed FDA to have more science, more scientists and staff, and for that given value to the private sector to be able to decrease review times. We've reduced it from 2 years in 1992 to 1.1 years today. Now, over the last so we held excellent hearings. They were very civil, very content-rich, but I also launched a listening tour in Maryland where I went out to the major biotech counties and heard from over 25 different companies about what did they think we needed to do. I asked them where their government helped them, where their government hurt them, where should their government get out of the way, and also where did they need a more muscular government, meaning really moving things ahead. They had great ideas and it was just fantastic. What I heard was we have to reauthorize PDUFA quickly, and we must make, though, improvements to the program. We needed to improve the drug review process. We need to increase communication there. In order to speed the drug review process, we made sure that we've increased the number of mandatory performance requirements between FDA and the life science product sponsors. I say life science because it's bio, it's pharma, it's medical devices, and some things that are both. PDUFA 5, which this is, it's the 5th time, allows us to use biomarkers to decrease development time by helping demonstrate therapeutic benefit more quickly. It requires FDA to develop a dedicated program for drug development and training of staff. We face turnover, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I'll come back to that. But make sure that those young people who are so smart in science need to know how to work to make the science evaluate in a timely way. This is absolutely critical. We've also incentivized the development of drugs for rare diseases. We also heard that, particularly for parents with children with very unique and poignant, heartbreaking diseases. What requires FDA to develop guidance related to advancing and facilitating these, increase outpatients, not only to the industry, but to those who represent the patient advocacy groups, and again, to develop training and certificate programs within FDA on how to review drugs for rare diseases. I could go through the many benefits of PDUFA. We've done also in here MDUFA, the Medical Device Act. We do generic UFA. So there are several bills in this bill. But we have to act. There has to be a sense of urgency. See, this is a different bill than many others. If we don't reauthorize many other bills, they just keep on going. But with the PDUFAs and the other user fee legislation, they actually would be sunsetted if we do not pass them by October. Now you might say, well, we'll wait till October. We'll deal with it with the cliff. Well, we can't do that because of the impact on both the people in the private sector and those in the public sector. Failure to reauthorize this in a timely manner would have catastrophic effects on FDA's ability to carry out its important role. If the user fee agreement expires, public and patients, public health, and industry will suffer. This isn't Senator Barb speaking. This is what our leading business and public health advocates are telling us. If we don't reauthorize the user fee is sunsetted. So that means U.S. pharmaceutical industries, which supports 4 million jobs, would be adversely affected. There would be no FDA to really work with. In 2010, Maryland private life science companies supported over 25,000 jobs. These companies are true innovators. On the average, it takes a new medicine 10 to 15 years to develop. If we fail to reauthorize PDUFA, which ensures efficient, consistent, and predictable regulatory environment, our private sector will lose out. We're going to lose out to Europe, and we're going to lose out to China, some of which is stealing our patents as we speak. It's going to have a terrible consequence to patients. Tens of millions of Americans rely upon drugs and biologics and medical devices. And we know we have legislation that works. We have a legislative framework that works. Now we need to get to work. If we don't pass this and reauthorize these major programs, what will happen is that we will need to send out RIF notices. We won't do it, but Dr. Mary Hamburg, the FDA CEO, the commissioner, will have to, starting in July and August, send out RIF notices to 4,000 federal employees at FDA, from the PhD and the MD to the important lab techs and so on and others that keep FDA going. This is no fooling around, folks. This isn't let's wait for the cliff. We will come to the brink if we do not authorize this. And just think about the world of FDA. If you think you're going to lose your job, that's what you're going to be preoccupied with. You're not going to be preoccupied looking at these clinical trials and moving their advances forward. We've worked so hard on this legislation. The private sector has worked hard to find a sensible center. So has Dr. Mary Hamburg and her team. Our committee has worked so well. We can do this. We have to have the will. And if we really want to stay ahead in the global economy, it's got to be by passing this legislation. You know, when everybody talks about stopping China, I don't know what China's going to do, but I know we can stop ourselves if we don't pass legislation that promotes innovation in our country and private sector jobs in a partnership with its government. Mr. President, I conclude by urging my people to vote on the motion to proceed, and I yield the floor.